Old-time naturalists loved to name birds for their friends and co-workers. It's called eponymous naming. Eponymous names have fallen out of favor. Some of the honorees engaged in or supported slavery or genocide. Others were racists. Bird Names for Birds is the movement to stop honoring such people. In its zeal, Bird Names for Birds would have all human names removed from the names of birds. Is that fair? Here are 3 brief stories of birds and the people they're named for. These 3 folks are innocent of antisocial transgressions. In 1821, the famous French-American naturalist John James Audubon was studying and painting birds in Louisiana. He lived in this house. He stayed in this room. One morning, out in the woods, he found a wren hopping about the trunk of a tree. It was new to him, and he painted it. Then he put the watercolor away. Years later, life and finding a publisher for his birds took him to England. He would publish all of his work there, over 400 life-sized images, including the little wren. No one else had described it, so Audubon was free to name it whatever he wished. And what he wished was to honor a man whom he had just met and who shortly after died. The engraver, Thomas Bewick. Here are Audubon's own words. Listen carefully. His French accent was very thick.
I honored the species with the name of Bewick, a person too well known for his talents as an engraver on wood to need any eulogy of mine. I found him, at all times, a most agreeable, kind, and benevolent friend.
Bewick was a simple man. His parents were tenant farmers, but even as a child, he was an artist. His father apprenticed him to the town's engraver. The master didn't like to work in wood and gave that chore to Bewick. Bewick loved it. He modified metal engraving tools for wood and revolutionized how engraving was done in England and around the world. Judge for yourself the accuracy and detail of his work. In 1797 came his History of British Birds, the forerunner of all modern field guides. By the time Audubon showed up, Bewick's name was a household word to European birders. Today, the little brown bird that bears his name is gone from much of its former American home. You must go west to find one in brush and branches, from the plains to the mountains. Listen for his song. It can carry a quarter mile. With luck, you may be able to find another Bewick in the same habitat. Our next story begins in the Pacific Northwest. Audubon's in this one, too. He first saw this bird as a specimen sent from the Columbia River by fellow naturalist John Townsend. Both Townsend and Audubon were in the business of discovering, describing, and naming creatures that were new to science. Audubon confused the warbler with the similar and well-known mourning warbler, so the specimen sat in a drawer. By the time he realized his error, Townsend had already described the bird in print. Townsend named it after his friend, Dr. William Tolmie, a surgeon, an advocate for the rights of Native Americans, and student of their cultures. So Tolmie got the official scientific name in Latin. Audubon didn't know this and called the bird McGillivray's ground warbler. Right or wrong, in English, Audubon's name stuck. As a youth, William McGillivray studied medicine, but he was barely out of his teens when he decided on a natural history career instead. Fortunately for him, his wife Marion, and their 13 children, he had learned anatomy well, and this kept him employed. Never leaving Britain and rarely out of Scotland. Perhaps his greatest sin was leaving Marion at home with the kids while he roamed the countryside chasing birds. McGillivray and Audubon met in 1830. As with so much of his life, Audubon left details.
I applied to Mr. James Wilson to ask if he knew of any person who would undertake to correct my ungrammatical manuscripts and to assist me with the more scientific part of the biography of the birds. He gave me the address of Mr. McGillivray, spoke well of him and his talents, and away to Mr. McGillivray I went. I made known my business, and a bargain was soon struck.
A years-long friendship developed during which McGillivray edited Audubon's work and turned Audubon's mangled English into good scientific description. Audubon, the backwoods artist, became a respected scientist with McGillivray's help. Very little has ever been written about this distinguished professor. Surely he deserves a bird. For our last bird, we travel to the Arctic. It's Sabin's gull, named for explorer and astronomer Edward Sabin. Sabin took part in 3 Arctic expeditions, where his main job was measuring the Earth's magnetic field. But he did find time for birds, and in 1818, along the west coast of Greenland, he found and shot 3 of what he called the fork-tailed gull. He promptly sent the specimens to his brother Joseph in London, who described the birds to the Linnean Society and offered the name Sabin's gull to honor Edward. With Sabin, we confront the philosophy of bird names for birds directly. He was an officer in the British military and was engaged in action at sea against an American privateer in the War of 1812. Should a combatant for an enemy power hold an honorific eponym in the United States? Should we bring back the name fork-tailed gull? But he was not the enemy for Canadians, who were British subjects. Should there be 2 separate English names, one for each country? Sabin also used the word Eskimo, now recognized as insulting to native peoples, but not known to be in 1818. According to the Alaska Native Language Center, the word, first seen in print in 1795, translated as people who make snowshoes from animal skin. It only became a pejorative years later. Is that enough to cancel Sabin? For curious naturalists, creatures named for people are a portal to biographies of men and women of the past. Be they good or evil, being introduced to who they were may be worthwhile. As a philosopher once said, you can't know a man until you learn his name.